I think, Scott, LSU wins the game 46-41. We had kidded after the first game of the century ended 9-6 in overtime back in 2011. A lot of talk about this game might be in the 40s, and it was. And I think that it was an exciting game. But I think as much as Alabama losing is what has everybody disappointed, I do think it is the clearest example yet of how the game has changed. In just 8 years, we have gone from 9-6 in overtime to 46-41 with over 1,000 yards of total offense. And, you know, LSU fans are giddy and should be, and Alabama fans are disappointed and should be. But I think, again, this is just an example. Nick Saban asked the question, 5 or 6 years ago, is this what we want football to be? And it is. And it is what it is. And I've said it before, Scott, and I'm probably old school. I'm not sure that I like the spread football, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for that because everybody likes points and everybody likes yards. But it's a different game, and LSU did it better than Alabama did on Saturday. And as good as Alabama was in the second half offensively, you can't dig a hole 33-13 at halftime against a quality team and expect to dig out and win the game, can you?
Well, here's the thing. Listen, there's 4 or 5, and when we go back and in retrospect, and you go back and look, and when you lose a ball game, you go deep into it when you lose it, and you try to figure out how and why. And listen, you can point to 5 or 6 different things in the ball game and for LSU, you just go, hey, we executed the offense, we did what we had to do. And Gary, I hate to use this kind of analogy, but it was like a video game. You're playing a video game, and I'm using Madden as an example. You're playing that game. It's an offensive-minded game, and if you lose a possession or two, and you can't stop somebody, you're probably going to lose. And this is
absolutely. I'm with you, Scott. That's the thing. It was an offensive game, and you make a great analogy. You can't give up possessions in a game like that. Alabama wasn't going to stop LSU the entire game, and LSU wasn't going to stop Alabama the entire game. Let's be honest. You make a great point. Alabama fought back and lit up the scoreboard and had 500-something total yards. The difference in the game were the mistakes. And clearly in the first half, there were 3 plays, Scott, that just sum up what you talked about. Tua's fumble at the 5-yard line, P. Ryan dropping the punt to give LSU outstanding field position, and then the interception right before the halftime, which was a dagger. If you want to just pick out 3 or 4 plays, you take those 3 plays away, and it probably more than likely it's a different outcome.
Exactly, and you knew going in, and nobody ever. I don't ever like to start the game with the ball. I always want the ball in the second half. The LSU got 4 of the final 5 possessions in the first half. I think scored 21 points on all of those, or 24 points. But the bottom line is you have to execute in a game of this magnitude, and in one mistake here, one mistake there, it can be fatal, and it was Saturday. I think the thing you take away from the ball game is that Alabama was on the verge of taking a beating at home that we had never seen there. And I texted you at halftime. I said, "Listen, we're about to find out the character of this football team now." You hear that Coach Saban, you hear everybody talk about playing 60 minutes in a ball game. And that game, you can't do anything about the first half. You're down, and what you have to do is go manage the ball game. I always feel like when you're behind, especially 2 scores, you manage the ball game in the third quarter, and you try to get to the fourth quarter and have the game within 1 possession. That's what you have to do. You can't win it on 1 possession. So you have to manage the game. Go, okay, we got to get back in the ball game, get it to a 1-possession game, and then take our chances. And they did that and had a chance to win, got to a 1-possession game twice, and then could not get a stop. So tackling was bad. People were lined up wrong. And listen, Alabama we can make excuses about how Alabama played all we want. But let's give credit to LSU and the way they executed, because they could have folded the tent too, Gary, in the fourth quarter when the lights came up, the sun went down, the stadium was rocking, you're within a touchdown. Alabama's got all the momentum. And what happened? Joe Brady took LSU right down the field. They were not they weren't conservative. They kept the gas down, the pedal on the gas, and executed their offense at a very high level, during the most crucial time of the game. And Orgeron knew, hey, you know what? We've got to go score here. They got all the momentum, and they were able to do it. So the game boiled down to execution, and LSU executed better than Alabama did, and that's why they won the ball game, and that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, the Joes, Joe Brady and Joe Burrow, the JBs. I mean, that's the difference in LSU football. I said it earlier in the show. I'm gonna be honest with you, Scott. I'm pretty knowledgeable and keep up with sports, and I follow the NFL closely. I love the NFL. I didn't know who Joe Brady was. I didn't know Joe Brady from the Brady Bunch. I mean, when the Saints hired him, I didn't. Joe Brady's coming over from the Saints to revamp the offense. Well, we've heard that before, but in this case, he has. It's amazing, and Joe Burrow is probably going to win the Heisman Trophy. I mean, I still think that Justin Fields has a strong candidacy. I think Jalen Hurts has a strong candidacy. I think Tua still has a candidacy. But I think Joe Burrow's going to win the Heisman Trophy, and I think he probably solidified that on Saturday. Let me ask you this. Are you surprised? Because, as I said, Nick Saban's Nick Saban. So nobody's going to trade Nick Saban for Ed Orgeron, period, ever.
Right.
But I thought, as you said, LSU was ready to play in the game, and I thought from a coaching staff standpoint, I thought their coaching staff did a better job getting their team ready to play. And then Alabama's did. And there's no other way around it. Now, Dave Aranda, we know he's really good. His team got torched pretty good, too. So I don't want to just, and late in the game while he's playing press man with a 2-touchdown lead, I have no idea. But overall, I thought here's the point I guess I'm making. I felt like if you put Dave Aranda on Alabama's sideline and you put Joe Brady in Alabama's press box and you gave LSU Pete Golding and Steve Sarkisian, I think Alabama would have won the game. I hate to make that analogy, but I thought that was the difference. I thought coaching staff-wise, right now I think they've got a stronger coaching staff.
Yeah, they do. Let's be honest. And Clemson had a stronger coaching staff in the national title game as well. So, and that's been an issue. We can't, we're paid to analyze football games and analyze what's going on in college football. And that's just the truth. Alabama's staff turnovers have been a problem. Recruiting continuity been a problem because of coaches leaving and going. I think Coach Saban is trying to rectify that. I think the staff's done a pretty good job, with this team. But injuries mount up. There's a million reasons why you don't play well, and a lot of it has to do with your opponent most of the time. But listen, Gary, to go in and win at Tuscaloosa. In the last decade, we've seen Herculean efforts at quarterback. Okay, we saw Cam in 2010. We saw Johnny Manziel in 2012. We also saw Deshaun Watson on a neutral field. But that was the best performance that I've seen in Bryant-Denny Stadium by an opposing quarterback maybe since I've been watching Alabama football for 50 years. So what he did Saturday, he was accurate. He was poised. He did what he wanted to do, and he knew when he went to the line of scrimmage what he was going to do. And they just executed at a high level. And we talked about this kid last week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire might be the most important guy on LSU's team. What he's been able to do, because you got a quarterback that's going to get you in the right call, going to make the right throw, make the right read. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire he and Najee Harris played the games of their lives Saturday. But Helaire made play after play after play.
Matchup nightmare for Alabama. You could see it early in the game.
Yeah, and LSU did that the way they came out in certain formations. They would take him out of the backfield, put him wide, and in the middle linebacker had to go with him. And it was already a mismatch. When they brought him in, they do a great job of hiding him in there. Alabama had numerous opportunities to tackle him for losses or stop him short of first downs. And that kid just made play after play after play. And I thought besides Burrow's performance, he was the MVP of the game Saturday.
I don't think there's any doubt. And we got to get to the break, but, I like Shane Lee. He's going to be a nice player. He can't run with Helaire, so they tried to play Benton a lot more. But it didn't matter. They couldn't do anything with him. I really thought they would just assign a safety to him. I mean, they did play 6 defensive backs a lot in the game. But LSU's offense is everything people said it is. It's dynamic. It's and scheme wise, and I think Sark's very good. But this Joe Brady fella is a whiz kid. There's no doubt. They had an answer for everything Alabama did on defense, including late in the game, the 3rd and 10, where Alabama could get a stop and Burrow got pressure. I thought he was going to go down, but he knew Allaire was out there in the flat. Allaire picked it up off his shoelaces and then took Trayvon Diggs for a 6-yard ride to get a first down, and that pretty much sealed the game. All right, we got to get to a break. This is the Gary Harris Show on Tide 100.9. We're going to continue analyzing this game in depth. We'll also touch on what happened elsewhere in the SEC over the weekend, but more Alabama LSU discussion with Scott Moore on the Gary Harris Show on Tide 100.9 FM. We'll continue after this. It's the Middle Monday here on the Gary Harris Show, 9:35. Let's face it, sometimes local is just better. Locally grown, locally sourced. Shop local, eat local. But what about local expertise? At Allstate, Andrew Kniffer in Northport is just that. He's local. He's got the expertise you need for all your insurance need. Give Andrew Kniffer a call today at 205-722-9201. That's 205-722-9201. Get in good hands today with Allstate Insurance, Andrew Kniffer Agency in Northport. Let's get back to the Bud Light Hotline powered by Adams Beverages. We're talking with Scott Moore, going in depth on Alabama and LSU, and just trying to kind of figure out how we got here. I think that's what's curious to me.
Yeah,
Scott is a few years ago when they tried to circumvent the rules because Alabama was about to go on the run, and they've gone on an amazing run, but I think they were about to go on a run that we've never, ever even seen anything come close to. If the game had stayed the way that it was, Alabama was just more physical. They had better players. They were better coached, and people couldn't hang with them. It was almost a shocking event when they lose a game. So things had to be done to even the playing field. Hence the spread. Hence the couple of years there were basically guys were blocking 5 and 6 yards downfield. Malzahn started it with Auburn and then throwing the football, and it was not getting called, and it became almost impossible to play defense. And Nick Saban said, "Is this what we want the game to be?" And the answer was yes. So he had to adjust, and he did. But I think for Alabama people, what's been difficult is they wanted the points. They wanted quarterbacks like Tua that can sling it all over the field. They wanted excitement, but they didn't want the flip side of that which is, and we're seeing it now, it's hard to play stifling defense when you play the way Alabama plays on offense. And I again, I'm not saying you don't need to get better on that side of the ball. They do. But LSU gave up 500-something yards too. They've not held people down. It's hard when you play this style of offense. I think we're still trying to wrap our arms around what is good defense now. Good defense Saturday would have been just getting a stop somewhere along the game to win. It's such a different game, and I said it all along, and I think you agreed with me. You can't have both. You can't have this dynamic offense that goes up and down the field and scores all these points, and then expect your defense to hold people to 200 yards of offense and 10 points anymore, regardless of who you play. I just think that's the reality of the game.
Yeah, well, you look at Auburn's defense; they were able to hold LSU to 23. That's the least amount.
Yeah, they don't play the same style offense Alabama does, though.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't. But
the difference is they had a couple of Alabama right now does not have the difference makers on the defensive line that they've had in the past. That's a fact. And you got to have good players on the defense. There wasn't a Quentin Williams on this team this year. And that has shown up every Saturday.
No doubt.
You got to push the pocket against anybody and do what? Affect the quarterback. You got to affect him. You got to get your hands on him. You got to knock him down. And Alabama just has not been able to do that really to any quarterbacks all year long outside of people like Arkansas. So we already knew that that's been a deficiency. Injuries have been an issue. Okay. Guys leaving early, that's an issue. But you know what? Those aren't excuses. You got to deal with them. You got to deal with them. So it is what it is right now. So Alabama's got to get better on defense. Defense last year probably cost them the national title. They were out of position last year. I don't think they were well coached last year. I certainly didn't like the plan Saturday. All that said, if you don't make mistakes on offense Saturday and play like you're supposed to, you win the football game. You win. So, there's always this tendency when Bama loses is to go, wow, man, because we sit here and go, as you mentioned earlier, it doesn't happen that often. So when it does happen, it's a shock, and you got to go figure out why. And you and I are like, let's get answers to this. bottom line is youth and injuries have prevented this defense from being what it can be. But you're exactly right, man. When you got offenses like LSU's and Alabama's that can score on anybody in the country and score quickly on anybody in the country, they play a lot more snaps. They're out there longer. There's substitution issues, all these different things that the new game we see in offense is creating issues. And a guy like Saban, I still think Nick Saban is adjusting to this himself. I still think he's trying to figure out the best way to attack an offense like Alabama's and LSU's, because it's a hard thing to do. Nobody else has figured it out either. I mean, that's the reason why LSU's undefeated and why they're probably going to get through the SEC title game undefeated and go into the playoff as the number one seed. So, again, you and I talked about this yesterday. It's okay that you can't win the national title every year, okay? The only thing you can hope for is to be in the top four when they announce the playoff picks. And listen, Alabama may not be a national title team. Nothing wrong with that, okay? A lot of youth here. But at the end of the day, they're still one of the four best teams in the country. And that is, to me, that is very, very evident. So let's let this thing play out. Alabama's got to win out. Let's see how it works out. But I think Alabama's got a really good shot at still getting into the playoffs. You lose the number one team in the country, a dominant football team, by 4 or 5 points, and you were in the ball game. You made a hell of a comeback. You didn't lay down. You didn't quit like they did. Let's be honest. That Clemson game, a lot of people felt like they just threw in the towel. They didn't throw in the towel Saturday. Fought back like championship teams do, and can maybe live to fight another day. So a lot of football to go, a lot of football left that you got to play at a high level, and I think Alabama's got a really, really good chance of getting into the playoff. Now, can they go win it? They're going to have to make a lot of changes, grow up, get some healthy guys back. But, I think Alabama's one of the four best teams. And right now, this day and age of college football, that's all you can hope for. If you're one of the four best teams, you have a chance. If you're not, you're going to be on the outside looking in for a national championship.
I think what it does, too, defensively, with the game changed so much is, 10 years ago, it was a different way Alabama played. I mean,
right.
You might have gotten caught with the 12 guys on the field, and you might have gotten off the field without giving up points. Now, when you make a mistake, it is just magnified. It's like the way Alabama used to play, it was offensively. All right, when you get into the scoring zone, you need to at least get 3. You need to get points. You need to maximize your scoring opportunities because you knew that every point was critical because you might have to try to win the game 13-10. And defensively, it was about stopping teams and not even giving up field position. Because now it's about, you're just trying to keep them from scoring. You're trying to hold them to a field goal rather than a touchdown. Teams move the ball. And so when you get caught, you get an interception, and it gets taken off the board because you can't get your personnel on the field correctly. That's huge in the game. Not that play. Or on a 3rd and 10, when you swing it out to a layer and you got a chance to make the tackle and you don't make it, you know that those mistakes are going to lead to points. Whereas in the past, you might make a mistake like that. Well, you know what? So what? You stop them the next they get an extra 3 downs, but you still don't give up another first down and the drive's over. Now, when you make those mistakes, they're penal. Those teams take it down and score against you. That's the biggest thing. It's just, and I guess when I say, Scott, I'm trying to wrap my arms around this new way of playing football. We've made fun in this part of the country, Big 12, for years. Oh, the Big 12, they don't play any defense. No, they try to play defense too. It's just when you play these kind of offenses, and it's happening in the SEC. Don't say it's not. Georgia's probably the one throwback team right now that's still kind of playing old school football. But, Alabama was trying to stop LSU. They were trying to stop them, Scott. They just couldn't. Okay? Yep. They just couldn't. Oklahoma said before, when they started giving up 40 or 50 points a game and score, they weren't trying to give up. You're not trying. The Alabama defense was not trying to let LSU score. It's just hard to stop these teams with these dynamic offenses, and the SEC folks are getting a taste of it now.
Well, I'll tell you this. When LSU put 33 up in the first half, I was like, if Alabama can hold them under 56 now, that's going to be a win. You'll have a chance to win the ball game. Listen, I thought they played fantastic in the second half. They got three straight stops. And, of course, the offense missed out on an opportunity there early on to get some points back on the board and could not. Some of the play calling there, as you mentioned, certainly left us scratching our head a little bit. listen, two other things too. You know, you get the interception right before the half, and then you get a 15-yard penalty that was totally freaking unnecessary, made by an offensive lineman that had no business making that kind of play. You've got to play disciplined football in a game like that, and that was totally ridiculous that a guy that's been playing as much football as Landon Dickerson has to make that, to go make that play. After the whistle blows, you go just blow somebody up. And that was a critical penalty in the ball game. That's the difference between 3 points and 7 points. And again, that was an undisciplined play. And this team's made a lot of undisciplined plays all year. And so this is a typical team that's got to work on that. If Alabama wants to be better, they got to start with little things like that, Gary. This team's made a lot of uncharacteristic mistakes all year long, not just in this game, but all throughout the year. It's been, quite frankly, an undisciplined team, which is not the Saban and normal that we've seen in Tuscaloosa. So can that be coached and fixed? Yes, it can. But it needs to manifest itself on the field. So, again, there were 4 or 5 things that went wrong for Alabama Saturday that if you correct it, maybe you'll have a chance to win a game like this year on a neutral site somewhere. So there's a lot to learn from Saturday, a lot of coaching opportunities from Saturday, but Alabama put itself in too deep a hole, made some critical mistakes, with penalties, with errors, mental errors. We hear Saban talk about that all the time. That's the first time we've seen Alabama at home in a big game like this, getting that kind of deficit where they hadn't started fast, gotten out of the gate quick, and it was just one little thing after another. And guess what? It added up, and you're all of a sudden down 20 at the half. And, Gary, at the end of the day, it was too far of a hold-up to come out to dig yourself out of to go win a game like that.
All right, it's 9:47. Scott, I'm going to keep you for an extra segment today because I don't want to get off this Alabama game yet. It's too big.
Okay.
And we'll do another segment at the top of the hour to cover the other SEC games. And also, Corey, at 10:30 after we do Rodney Orr, we'll be available to take phone calls if you want to call back in, and we'll have some sound from Saban and Orgeron in that last half hour as well. One on a Metal Monday here. Scott Moore with us. We're going to do one more segment on Alabama and LSU. The next segment, kick off the second hour, we're going to talk about some of the other SEC games. Scott, again, it's just so rare. Alabama fans have been so blessed to have, a dynasty like this under Nick Saban, and for those of us our age can remember the one under Coach Bryant as well, and some of the older fans can even go back and remember. And of course, we saw Coach Stallings have a nice run, but some of the older fans will remember Frank Thomas, and then historians, of course, remember Wallace Wade. The tradition at Alabama football is unmatched in the history of the game in the South and maybe in the country. But when you're that iconic and when you're good, everybody's trying to figure out a way to beat you, and that's what has been going on in this conference. We saw it Saturday. LSU has been, focused on this. Orgeron said it. We're coming, and you got to give the guys some credit. They have been doing everything that they could do as a staff to figure out a way not only to beat other teams, to put themselves into this position, but to come into Tuscaloosa and get the win. And that's what you're up against when you're Alabama in this league. When everybody's gunning for you, you get everybody's best shot. You said it. We've seen some remarkable performances by quarterbacks that have led teams to victories here. And that's just part of it. And then when you have a team like Alabama has this year that maybe isn't quite to the level that they have been at in some other seasons, there might have been some other Alabama teams that could have taken those shots and won the game. This one on Saturday couldn't. So, again, I want to give credit to LSU. They earned the victory. It wasn't flukish. I think Alabama is capable of beating them, but if they played again in a month, LSU might beat them again. I think LSU's that good. And they have done what Orgeron said they were going to do. They've put themselves at Alabama's level. You have to give them credit.
Yeah, you do. But I will say this, though, and I'm a firm believer of this. When you win a game like this, you need to act like you've been there before. You really do. The scoreboard doesn't.
Oh, no, they showed their, what. That's
I think
the way it is.
Be brought up, too, because, listen, you still got a lot of games to go, and you never know when something like that's going to come back to bite you. So, listen, congratulations on the win. It's one of the last, 11 that you've won. And, Alabama, just for everybody out there, Alabama's not going anywhere. They'll be around for a while. The coach still at Alabama is the best of all time. And so Alabama's program, again, didn't go anywhere. And if we're honest about it, it took LSU playing its best and having a quarterback performance for the ages, and everything had to go right for LSU to win that game Saturday. Okay, they didn't come into Alabama and beat Alabama by 40 points. It was a 4-point game. It was a one-possession game that in the second half could have gone either way. So, again, I'm giving LSU all the credit in the world for doing what they had to do. It's a great football team that they have over there. It certainly looks like a national championship team. However, they got to go finish it now. So LSU has not responded well in the last few years after the Alabama game moving forward. Now that you get over that hump, how do you handle it going forward? Because it's not going to be easy at all, not with a couple of games that they got left. Got a big rivalry game with Ole Miss. Got a huge rivalry game with A&M. And then you got to go to Atlanta and probably play a very, very good Georgia team too. So LSU's got a lot to play for. So they've got to. We'll see if they can put this win behind them and move forward, or does the obsession with Alabama linger on into the season? We'll see, because we don't know this about Ed Orgeron yet. Now that he's on the mountaintop here in the SEC West for a minute, how are they going to handle it? We've seen teams get there, Gary, but not stay there very long. So to me, that's an unknown with LSU and Orgeron moving forward. Can they stay there now that they've reached the mountaintop?
One other thing that is just to the detriment of LSU in years past, to Auburn, now this year again to Alabama, is you talk all you want about Georgia and the East is made gains. The East is still, compared to, it's not even close. I mean, Georgia is able to take an embarrassing loss at home against South Carolina and not even phase them. And even if they lose to Auburn, which will knock them out of the playoffs, they still will go to Atlanta.
That's right.
It's just an easier division. And when you're in the West, the margin for error, we've seen this a lot, where Alabama's lost one game, gone 7-1 in the division, and doesn't even get to go to Atlanta. More than likely, we'll see that again this year. It's just we got a couple minutes, Scott, but it's a tough grind in the West Division every year, and the East is a much easier path to Atlanta.
It is. Listen, Alabama elevated the game in the SEC West for everybody. I mean, we've seen Mississippi State rise up, become the number one team in the country. We've seen Ole Miss be in the playoff picture before years ago. But, Arkansas is about looking for a new coach now because it's so tough over there. But listen, Alabama, Auburn, and LSU have dominated this side of the bracket for the last 27 years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. All due respect to A&M and Jimbo, but if you're not LSU, Auburn, or Alabama, it's going to be very, very tough to break through over there. But it is a very difficult division. And when you go through it, it is a meat grinder. It does beat you up. It's very difficult to navigate. So, and that's why when you do navigate it and you do get to the college football playoff, there's a really good chance you're going to play for the national championship. So it is what it is, and everybody understands that landscape. Got to recruit well, got to coach well, got to be able to play very hard every week. But, man, when you get out of this division and you've won it, it says a lot about your team, a lot about your depth, and a lot about your athleticism on your roster. So, and listen, that's going to be the case for the next 7-8 years, Gary. That's just the way it is.
I mean, it was the game of the century, part 2, and it was an incredible game. Polar opposite of 9-6, but it was still phenomenal. But we do want to move on because there are a lot of other topics to touch on, Scott. And this weekend, there was football played outside of Tuscaloosa. And in the SEC, a really interesting game was in Lexington. And I picked Kentucky to win that game, and maybe they should have, but they didn't. And this Jeremy Pruitt turnaround is continuing in Knoxville. I think there's every possibility now that they may win out, Scott. I said that after I had sold the guy out a little bit. The way they got off to the season they got off to, I said, man, I think he's in over his head. But Ellis Johnson told me, he said, no, the guy can coach football. Watch him work. And I saw something in that team here in Tuscaloosa in a loss. And I think I told you, I think we talked about it. If they play like that, and I didn't know that they would, but I said, if they play like they played against Alabama, they'll beat some people. They haven't lost since, Scott, and that was a big win, 17-13 in Lexington for the Vols. They're coming. Yeah, like LSU was a couple years ago. It looks like Tennessee's coming now.
Kentucky is a 1-point favorite in the ball game, and I picked Tennessee to win that game. I thought that they would because of some of the things that you just said. And listen, Jarrett Garantano has been criticized for not being a team player for a while, and we saw him, get his face mask tugged in Tuscaloosa, and he kind of could have folded the tent too. He's been coming off the bench in the last 3 ball games, and he has played lights out. I mean, he was lights out against South Carolina, played well against UAB, and Saturday night, this guy has had a total attitude change as a quarterback, and it's really affected Tennessee's team. They are more confident on offense. Their defense is flying around and making plays, mainly because I think they understand what they're doing on defense right now, and they become a very physically gifted, dominated team. So they've been physical, and it really kind of started against Georgia. I thought the first half they played against Georgia really got this team heading in the right direction, of course, and then they just kind of ran out of gas in the second half against the Dogs. But, man, since that night against Alabama and moving forward, they have played extremely well. I'm with you. I think they do win out. I think they are going to get to a bowl now. And Jeremy's done a fantastic job. And I think finally that roster – and this phrase is overused so much about buying in. I mean, we hear it from everybody, but you know what? Tennessee and their players and some of the holdovers from Butch Jones's team that he recruited, they're starting to finally find themselves up there. You're right. Jeremy Pruitt could coach football, and he's got a roster right now that's just not all that great. There's some talented players. They got some good receivers. They got a pretty good offensive line. But now Jarrett Garantano is finally starting to play like the quarterback we all thought he might be when he got there. Most importantly, though, Gary, his attitude off the field has really infected this team with confidence, and I got to give him credit. He has made a complete 180 from where he was at the start of the year to where he is today.
Yeah, and it's like I said, Tennessee now is smelling a bowl game, and rightfully so. Meanwhile, in Columbia, South Carolina, the Will Muschamp head scratcher just continues.
Wow.
They'll have a win like they do at Georgia, and they'll have one of those or 2 a year, but they can never do anything with it. And App State's a good team. Western State's a good team. I'm not surprised they won, but still, if you're going to be South Carolina and you're going to be in the SEC and you're going to talk about, eventually competing for SEC East Division and SEC championships, you got to beat Appalachian State, and they didn't. And I think his future is starting to be in doubt there in South Carolina. I think he's an outstanding defensive coordinator, but I think it's fair to ask the question after what happened at Florida and what's happening in South Carolina, if this guy's a quality SEC head coach. I don't know.
Yeah. Listen, you can't lose to Appy State. And I mean, listen, Georgia Southern went to Appy State last week and beat them at home. Okay, Georgia Southern. You cannot let Appy State come to your stadium and do what they did. It was an embarrassment. I think this is one of the worst losses that they've had at South Carolina since he's been there. The experiment as him as head coach, this is what you're going to get. Okay, let's be honest. We've got a body of work now that you can look at with Will Muschamp. Occasionally, his team gets up and plays somebody like Georgia tough or Florida tough, and they may get a win every now and then. But it doesn't matter, Gary, if you upset somebody and then you can't win at home games like this. It's just, I think the experiment has run its course. This is what you're going to get in a Will Muschamp. So I think South Carolina has got to ask itself, what they want in their football program. And I'm with you. Some guys are great head coaches. Some guys are great defensive coordinators, right? And we've seen one of those at Alabama. So I think the experiment at South Carolina with Will Muschamp could be coming to a close because they've still got a couple of big games left, and they've still got to play Clemson too. So I would say depending how he plays against Clemson, if they get blown out and they don't play well, and Jake Bentley also went through senior day activities this past weekend. He's got a year of eligibility left. I think that was an indication that he will not return.
No, he'll transfer out, absolutely. He'll be quarterback for hire, no doubt.
There. So but I think we need to point that out as well.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you did. You're right. He'll be one of these guys that he'll be on the free agent market, and some schools scoop him up. I mean, that's becoming very common now. As this transfer portal has opened up opportunities for teams to find him a quarterback, and even if they don't have one on their roster. And Bentley will be in demand. Believe it. He might have lost his job this year, but he's been a quality player. All right, what happened in Fayetteville is
wow.
It was just too much for Arkansas people to take, and I'm torn on this. It's all part of the system. When you pay these coaches the millions that you do, you pay them for results based on your expectation that they can get the job done. And then when they don't, I'm talking about the schools and the boosters, the people. You look foolish for paying Chad Morris that kind of money, and the guy came in and never won an SEC game for you. And then people say, well, you got to give him more time. But can you? I mean, they're a train wreck. I mean, I don't blame Arkansas. No, they're going to have to eat $10 million.
Terrible.
But it's one thing, it's one thing when you're losing to SEC teams. But when you lose to San Jose State and then you get run out of your own stadium by Western Kentucky, who has your former quarterback, Ty Story, on the roster, and you get, I mean, I don't know if the term quit is appropriate. I just think Arkansas is that bad. I don't think they tried to get beat 45-19. I just don't think there's much they can do about it. That's an awful team. I can't blame Arkansas, and I know all the coaches out there are going to come to his defense. Well, you can't do it. He took over. But I understand all that. But they made no progress. Scott, in fact,
none.
Every week they got worse. And if you know he's not the guy, and he's not the guy, you can't limp along with him anymore even to the end of the season. You've got to get it. You got to get him out so you can go on with your search and let people know you've got a job opening. And it's a tough job, but you know, I don't think there was any other thing for Arkansas to do here. Do you?
Well, you just said, listen, the three guys that we just talked about, Jeremy Pruitt and then Roy Taggart in the mix too, and then Chad Morris, they all got hired at the same time. They've all had the exact same amount of time. And we just talked about Tennessee's progress. Okay, we've seen a difference that Jeremy Pruitt and his staff have made in that team in the last month of the season. You didn't see it at FSU, and you dang sure didn't see it at Arkansas. And there's no reason to continue this. Absolutely none. They did get worse. They quit on Chad Morris several weeks back, and it was really appropriate really pointed out last week. When you let a team rush for nearly 500 yards on you, that's hard to do against the air, man. And so this wasn't going to work out. It was a wrong hire all around. And, Chad Morris is a dang good coordinator, probably really a good fit in a smaller school like SMU, but he's not ready for the SEC or any other major job for that matter. I just never thought the rah-rah stuff up there. He tried to build it in the image of Clemson. That's great that you want to try to do that, but those kids never bought into it. They never, ever, ever bought in. The locker room has been a mess. They haven't been able to recruit. And honestly, Gary, this may have set Arkansas back. This is going to be a long, long road back for Arkansas. I mean, this might be a 5 to 7 year job for the next guy. It's going to take a while to rebuild this program. This is the worst we've seen Arkansas, Gary, maybe since we've been alive following college football. That's how bad they are right now.
What's your feeling on where they'll turn? I know his name's not being mentioned much right now, and I know he's going to put out a statement that he's happy, he's disappointed for his friend Chad Morris and all that. I still think Gus Malzahn may be in play here. Would you agree with that, or am I off?
I absolutely agree with you 100%. And Auburn, we all know Gus Malzahn is going to get judged on what happens to him too in the next 3 weeks. He's going to get judged Saturday when Georgia goes there, and when Alabama goes there too. So, the final chapter for Gus hasn't been written at Auburn yet, but it could be very, very quickly, depending on how they show up Saturday against Georgia and Alabama. This is going to be a tall task for Auburn, too, because Georgia and Alabama are more talented, okay? So it's going to be interesting to see, but if things don't go right in these next two games at home over the next 3 weeks, there's a lot of people saying that Gus will listen, that he's ready to make that move, and listen, Gary, I wouldn't be shocked at all if that happened. An 8-4 season this year with all the expectations Auburn had, even with this difficult schedule, I think Gus would be the front runner. And if he loses to Alabama or Georgia, he might get that opportunity.
Gary Mason, is he next to go in Nashville at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, they the last 3 weeks for them have not been very good. We've started to see teams now. Missouri has been kind of an enigma as well. They didn't play well Saturday night, and over the last 3 weeks, they've just been downright awful too. But I don't think they're going to make a change. But, yeah, I just think that, man, that is a grind trying to coach at Vandy and going through this schedule and all that. And I think he's done some very, very good things, but I also think that they're ready to go in another direction at Vanderbilt as well. Yeah, we went through last year, didn't have any openings in the conference, Gary, for the first time in forever. This year, it's going to probably be a little different. The pendulum is swinging the other way this year for sure.
Just a couple of minutes, Scott. I do want to get to Rodney Orr on time, but just a yes or no answer here. Does Georgia beat Auburn this weekend at Jordan-Hare or not?
Yes, they do.
Does Alabama win out?
Yes, they do.
Will Alabama make the playoff right now today, in your opinion?
I think they will, Gary. I think they're one of the 4 best teams in the country and will be on Championship Saturday as well. Yeah, I look for the Tide to finish in that 4th spot and get shipped out to Arizona to take on probably LSU or probably Ohio State is what I think will happen.
Yeah, Ohio State's pretty dynamic. It's been interesting. Great stuff as always, Scott. And folks, listen, Scott will be on the Jay Barker Show today at noon here on Tide 100.9 FM and also on the Gulf Coast on iTalkSEC Radio. You can also follow him on Twitter at iTalkSEC and, of course, catch him every Monday here on the Gary Harris Show. I enjoyed it, Scott.
Hey, that was great, Gary. Thank you so much, buddy.